HO Talk Show.
If everybody's all buckled in, enjoy the ride. Because I am joined by two esteemed gentlemen right about now. I'm so happy that they obliged to our invitation because we're talking about none other than City Manager Sam Sanders and also newly elected Mayor Juan Diego Wade. Gentlemen, happy Sunday afternoon to you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hello. Thanks for allowing us to be here.
Yes, indeed. So you all know our show pretty well, right?
Yes.
Like you all know, in my humble opinion, like, you know, what we do is we definitely speak truth to power. You know, we use these airwaves to have real conversations. You know, nothing overly formal, but something for the community to get to know businesses, organizations, and in your case, elected officials. You know, just a little bit better, and be able to have this platform of communication is something that I'm glad that you all feel comfortable and trustworthy enough to join us as well. So we appreciate you once again.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. So let's actually start with this, and both y'all can give your takes on it. Whoever wants to go first, and if that one answers sufficiently enough, you can feel free to pass. But I'm sure a lot of people don't know the definitions. A lot of people don't understand the collaboration that happens when it comes to your titles, your roles, as Sam as city manager, Juan as mayor. So let's start right there. Go ahead and break down to the people what it means to be the city manager of Charlottesville, to be the mayor of Charlottesville, and how those two roles intersect.
I'll let the mayor go first.
All right.
He's the figurehead of the city.
Yes. Thank you. So essentially, the city council hires the city manager to run the city. We have to make some decisions, but we leave the day-to-day operation of the city to the city manager. But Charlottesville is a very relational, connected city. And when we're out there, you know, people come to us to ask questions and concerns and things. And so, you know, often now as mayor, I get a question, you know, they want to set up a meeting or something. They say, can you direct me to your scheduler, your staff? And I just have to laugh because it's me. It's I have a staff of 3, me, myself, and I. So, but
they're all busy.
Yes, that's right.
You mean you didn't demand that in your rider? You didn't say, in
yes.
order for me to be mayor, I'm going to need a window office. And
yeah, that sounds good. So I think that Lloyd Snook best said it when he says that the mayor is kind of the first among equal. That I help with the coordinating of the meeting, and a lot of times I speak on behalf of the city council. But we're all equal. We're not like Richmond, where they have a strong mayor form of city council and management. Where here we work with each other. We all are equal, and we work with Sam and other staff to implement our policy and our vision.
Sam, you want to answer that?
Yeah, I guess what I'll add is that it's helpful to even break it down so that folks really do understand that when you run into council members, you're asking them questions and they don't necessarily always have the details, but they know where to get the answers. The city manager's responsibility is really to run the city. I mean, all the mechanics, the operations of the city. So that is making sure that trash gets picked up, that streets get cleaned, sidewalks get constructed and maintained, that parks are running and operating as they should, that we are addressing various issues, public safety issues, all the many concerns that just really are how a city has its tip, how it is moving, how is it functioning. And then the council is setting the strategy and the vision. They identify the vision more than anything, and then they more or less prioritize what the strategies are. And then as the city manager, it's my job to implement their vision for the city. And they're elected by the people, so that vision is the people's vision.
Gotcha. Okay, I was just about to ask that as far as the like the role that the council comes into play and whatnot. So is it so when the mayor and the city manager sort of is, let's say, faced like with the vote and whatnot, does it ever come down to city manager and mayor airing out conversations, or is it always the council comes up with a decision and then there's times where the city manager then gets involved on passing something and giving me examples of what those things are. That once the council has something on the table, when the city manager gets involved.
Well, as far as I know, we certainly look at staff, in particular the city manager, to provide information. But when we're up there after the vote, press the button when Madam Clerk tells us, we don't look at Sam and say what should we do. By that point, we should have all the information we need to make the decision. And I feel very well informed. The way I typically gather information is that I certainly listen to the staff report, read the staff report, and listen to the staff presentation, and I bring my knowledge to the table, and I make the decisions, and that's how I approach it. And I'm sure each council will have their separate ways of doing it, but that's the way we do it. I think a good example would be the zoning ordinance that we just passed about 1 month ago. We had, for me, it was two involved years from when I was on council, but had been going on for many years, and we all had various inputs from staff, from the public, from emails, from calls, and everything. And when it came to that vote, we had to make the decision based on what we thought was the best for the city, and we all voted for it. But it's been some decisions that we made where it was 4-1 or 3-2 or what have you. So and I think it's fine that from time to time we don't agree on everything.
Yeah. I mean, that's a democracy, right?
Yes, man.
Yeah.
And I would add, Charles, that I'm not a 6 vote. It's important
that's important
for people
to clarify.
To understand
Yeah.
That my politics are my politics. I am here to do a job to inform this council, provide them as much information about any issue that may arise, make sure that they don't miss certain aspects of the decision. It's not about me trying to sway one way or the other, because again, I'm not the elected official who was put on the dais to perform on behalf of the larger city, although I would say my opinion matters in that I can express it to them and share with them details about the various issues, and then ensure that they go to that dais with all the information that they can possibly have so that they're making the best informed decision.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. So speaking of which, we are, believe we are in a budget season. I think
we are.
Yeah.
That's what I'm working on every day.
Yeah.
I feel you. And I think that's what Awan was alluding to as well. And so let's kind of address that then, if you don't mind. So, what are the big budget items, and how are they prioritized?
I'll name them and I'll let you prioritize them. How about that?
See, look at that. Look at that co-work. I like that.
That's for sure. So we have a number of issues of priority, a number of identified strategies, I should say. What's big for this year's budget, collective bargaining, comp and class, which is the reordering and payment of our employees, the compensation schedules for our employees, something that we've fallen behind on over the years. We have a lot in the climate, environmental world, so just climate action in general, transportation, as council is considering some decisions on alternative fuels for our bus fleet. Housing, affordable housing specifically as a global concept is really, really a big issue for us. Homelessness has a subsection of high priority, and how do we intervene in that space? And we'll always have those more normal topics that will always be in every budget cycle: public safety, recreation and culture, as well as how do we make sure that we're not missing out on quality of life matters for the larger community as a whole.
Gotcha. Now something jumped out at me though that you said as far as the first part about I believe you said a city employee.
Yes.
And fall behind that budget. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Sure.
That sounds like that could have got a little messy.
It's big and complicated.
Yeah.
It could have, but council made a decision. So again, I've had to remind some folks that council made this decision When the General Assembly made it possible for the state of Virginia to enter into collective bargaining for the first time, that basically means that employees can come together as a group and then advocate through a negotiating process with the government and ask for certain pay and working conditions. Mm-hmm. We're implementing that this year for the first time. It is a monumental task to get that done, because nobody really has that background unless you've lived somewhere else or you've experienced it. Mm-hmm. So we've had to teach staff how to even face that, and we're going to have to teach our team afterwards, once it's in place, how to work with that. But the intention is really that the desire was for council to eliminate the longstanding issue of employees not being paid well, not being paid according to the market. Mm-hmm. Let's do our best to get our team to the level and standard they should be in comparison to their peers.
And I just want to add on to that it's, for this year's budget is going to be, really critical in this time, because we also did, Sam mentioned the comp and class study, because we did a review of every single employee of the city, and we realized that we were behind in a lot of those positions as well. But we also have 3 units that are in the collective bargaining, the transportation, fire, and the police. And so we're going to be doing a lot of catching up. But as far as I know, there may be 1 or 2 other localities in the state, but certainly not a lot that's ventured into the collective bargaining. So we'll be, kind of again punching above our weight class in a lot of, in this area as well. But we want to be that role model. We want employees to be happy so that they can serve the constituents of the great city, at a very high level. So it is important to us. And for me, again, I can't, speak for every council, but I believe that, that they feel like education is going to be an important priority. The compensation, affordable housing, and the climate. Those are going to be things that we are going to be really focusing on. And also for me, I have also a strong passion of working with young people that are programs and things that impact our youth. That when we get the budget and have the presentations and things that I will be looking out for.
Yeah. And I know Razor has a question for Sam, but just before that, realistically, what do you think you can accomplish? Because I know out of everything that y'all said, a couple of things that I'm hearing the most, right, is that, folks definitely are big on economic development, and you can lump, affordable housing, within that, or whether it's local businesses being able to, to flourish here, even when they don't have, a lot of capital to start. And then I heard you mention education, so all that our school system faced in the city, fixing the issues that may reside there. And of course, the violence issue that thankfully, has been trending downward. But yeah, when you look at what's realistic in your prioritizing the budget, what are you tackling first? How are you approaching that?
So I think that we are going to get the budget. The state is still coming out with numbers. We're going to have to see how much money we're going to have to work with, and then look at those priorities that we mentioned, and just really just after through it. It's long meetings. It's a lot of meetings. It's a lot of information. And when it comes down to it, it's just the 5 of us are really going to have to make some really tough decisions. And we know that some people are not going to be happy with us, but it's just not going to be enough money to do everything that we want. And I know that people have heard over the last few years we've had a pretty robust surplus. I'm understanding that that's not going to be the case this year, and people will see as they get their tax notices here in the next few days. It's not going to be as high as I understand, but still an increase, but probably not as high. We won't have as much money to work with, but the needs that we have are really increasing. Charlottesville schools, we understand they're not going to get as much money from the state because they're looking at numbers now from the pandemic, which is lower, not just for Charlottesville, but for many other districts. And so we have to figure out if we're going to make up the money that they're not going to get from the state. And I remember from my school board days is that even if we did nothing at all, just to regular increase from healthcare and things like that is usually another $2 or $3 million without any new initiatives. So education is expensive. Those things like that we just going to have to, the five of us with input from the staff and the public, just going to have to figure out how we're going to do it. We're going to do it by April 12th. We're going to have an adopted budget, but what it's going to look like, I'm not sure yet.
Communication is key because, like, y'all know that's going to be hard. Like, that is hard. I'm saying is it, like in the present, for our listeners and whatnot, everybody's listening, is because people look at Charlottesville, like, let's be completely honest, and they look at the wealth that's here, look at the cost of living that's here, right, and then to then say you may not have enough money for stuff. It's like communication is going to be key, and really explaining that to the public.
Yes, sir.
What I'll say to that is that while yes, there's a lot of money here, there are only so many ways that the government can access that money. So that's the reality of the situation, in that it comes through sales tax, meals tax, property tax. A person who has a whole lot of money may have a fine home, but I can only tax it once. And I can only tax it for the level of that home, not their bank account. So there's a disconnect in that sense that while there's a presence of those significant resources, those are not all available for the disposal of the government itself. And in that regard, there is a disconnect in how even the state calculates its formula, because the LCI, which is the formula that generates the money that produces an amount of funds for the school system, takes into account the wealth in your community, meaning the ability for the local community to cover what the state does not have to cover. In that regard, because I don't have access to those resources that we just talked about, that in itself causes us a penalty. It's punitive in a sense, because the expectation is that because that money is here, it's being spent differently here than anywhere else, and that doesn't really hold up to do that.
That's deep. So I believe Reza has a question for you. Okay.
Yeah, thank y'all for coming here, gentlemen. The question initially was for Sam, but both of y'all can probably answer this. All right, going back to what you just said about there's going to be less money. Y'all are already going to get questioned about what you're going to do about the homeless situation.
Yes.
How do you decide where you place the money? Charlottesville, because I'm not from here, I see that Charlottesville is focused on growth at this point. And a lot of the local localities send their homelessness here because y'all have resources that help people. But if you have to decide if you're going to put money into the homeless situation and you really don't have a A to Z plan for them, but it's easier to invest in the property to grow the city, how do you make that decision when the city is screaming, help the people that need help?
Sure. It's a good question. And I think there are multiple answers to that question, but I'll say that how do we decide where the money goes is council's decision from a prioritization sense. They have to tell me what the priorities are, and then I strike a balance in those priorities based on what they communicate, the level of concern, the level of interest in responding to this matter or that matter. And we've done that. We've done some work in trying to make sure that while they have a list of 9 things plus a commitment to Jedi, therefore 10 things, I've had to repeatedly say to them, and we need to prioritize those 10 because I can't put all the money in all 10 buckets at an equal amount. It's just impossible. But what I can do is I can make sure that something is happening in each of those buckets. What we need to figure out is what's your priority within each bucket. Let's make sure that we move your priority forward in each of the buckets, and no 2 buckets are the same. The affordable housing bucket for the city of Charlottesville is the biggest bucket. That's where we're spending the bulk of the money. The intent there is that that money should reach all rungs on the ladder, including those at the lowest, the 0 AMI, which are homeless individuals. And that is why recently you've heard that I've been working on trying to get this property on Avon Levy. And while it generated a lot of extra attention, it was simply to identify that priority for council. They want to make a dent in the problem, into the situation that forms that problem. I found an opportunity, and we now have to plan to that opportunity so that we don't have people missing that. It seems like we're doing one thing and not another. I know that I'm a master juggler now. That's part of the job description. I have to do all things, many things all at once, which is why I have to have a good team to do that.
Mayor Juan, who
yes.
has your ear right now? If I just want to ask this one last question, who has your ear? The people bringing money to the city, or the people in the city that need the money?
So I mean, for me, because I've been pretty well involved and connected with the city for the last 35 years. On any typical day, I could speak with a person that's unhoused, that's been here for a week or a couple of years, or speak to someone who is considering a multi-million-dollar proposal. I have, it's not like one group. I'm happy to say that I have a voice in a lot of different communities. I hope that that's one of the things that makes me an effective counselor, because I just don't have the ear of one particular constituent, and so, and which I like, because all of that comes into play for me when I am making a decision. I'm just thinking about yesterday. It was a Saturday, so it was a kind of a slow day. I only spoke with 4 or 5 constituents, and one of them was someone who's living in a community of color, traditional community of color here. They were really concerned about their neighborhood transitioning into more and more Airbnb, and how do they handle, what can we do about that? And I also spoke to someone else who's like wondering how this new zoning ordinance is going to impact their development that they're planning. And so that is all in a typical day, for at least for me, and I'm probably likely for other counselors as well.
Yeah, and I think the deeper, point to that question too is, out of all that you've said, is like what has the upper hand when it comes to what the city needs, because like you said, you can't, like, you don't have enough to distribute funds to everything equally. So, like, do you feel like, and this is for both of you, of course, do you feel like that the city is more in need of the economic development, or is it more in need to, you may say, spending money to help the current needs of the city?
So I'm definitely from the camp, because my day job, I do career counseling and I help employees and employers, reach their fullest potential. But one of the ways that we can provide the $10 million for affordable housing is by having a robust economic environment. And so we need to be able to make sure that we are enticing business to come, supporting our businesses. We just can't cut them off and say, well, we need to focus on this. We need to have that robust. And I see that every day. And for me, in my job, it ties in together because I'm working with many of those individuals from the Haven that are in Pacham with employment, helping them with their resume, helping them set up interviews, doing mock interviews with that. That is all that I do on a typical day with my job as a career counselor. With Albemarle Accountable, I help individuals throughout the entire region. I don't ask, them to provide residency. So it has to all tie in together in my sense.
Gotcha. Anything else?
Yeah, I would say that it doesn't have to be a choice, because both works. The economic development priority is how you ensure that you have a healthy city. A healthy city is one that is not stagnant. It's constantly changing, evolving, growing. It's those resources that come from the economic development work that actually funds some of the social work that needs to be done, the community work that needs to be done, the reinvestment, the redistribution of funds to help reach those that are looking for somebody to reach towards them because they can't reach as far on their own. And then the other part that's important is, if you take a look at the zoning ordinance and the integration of inclusionary zoning, we're teaching developers a priority that they don't always appreciate. And it's not a knock against them, because I know developers and I was one at one time. But the key for the inclusionary zoning aspect, where they have to include affordable units, is because we're telling them it's that much of a priority.
Okay.
Don't bring us a project that doesn't have affordable housing in it. And because we don't want to continue to just wait and see if you'll do it, now we're going to require it. For me, that's the government dictating to those around it, this is how we want to operate. This is what we want you to be responsive to. And that's why I see that it's both instead of a choice.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. For the feedback, y'all. We're gonna take a quick break, but when we come back, we're gonna dive deeper into the housing and development. And we have online with us our partner over at Charlottesville Tomorrow, Erin O'Hare, and y'all probably know she's been doing great reporting on the Fifeville neighborhood, Cherry Avenue development is coming. So definitely want your perspectives on that as far as how how it affects the city and your plan for that. But family, stay tuned. We'll be back with much more from our city manager and mayor, Sam Sanders and Juan Diego Wade. Stay tuned, y'all. IMHO Talk Show. IMHO Talk Show. Still here, still standing as promised. Razor Sir Charles and our friend Erin O'Hare from over at Charlottesville Tomorrow. We are here with city manager Sam Sanders and newly elected mayor Juan Diego Wade. So Juan, before we get back into the issues and the topics from our listening audience, let me ask you this about just the choice to become mayor, because as you said about 35 years of being involved in the city, in the community. Why was becoming mayor on the list of of next moves?
Yeah. Well, if you had asked me, I say 3.5 years ago, if I would be on council, I would probably said no. I'm happy on school board, but things change. And when I was elected to city council, I became vice mayor, and an opportunity came, among the five of us, and I just think that it was a good opportunity for me to step into that role. I felt like I had, I understood what to do and how to move forward. I'd been chair of the school board and, chair of other big organizations. And so it was my turn. And so yes, it's been 3 weeks, but it's like, it's been like dog
like
years.
3 years.
Yeah.
Busy 3 weeks.
Yeah.
No, it's about to get busier for sure.
Yeah.
They would definitely appreciate you. Yeah, so there's so much more that we're going to address in family. Definitely tell a friend, and chime in. IMHO Talk Show online. You can comment with any questions or what have you that you would like to contribute to this conversation with your city manager and your mayor of city of Charlottesville. But before we switch gears anymore, though, let's go ahead and dig a little deeper into the housing and affordable housing and development conversation. Because like I said, I'm going to kick it over to Erin O'Hare from Charlottesville Tomorrow. Because for those that don't know, Erin has been doing great work that you can find on charlottesvilletomorrow.com. Erin not only has been covering the Levi lot that the city manager Sanders was talking about in regards to possibly being a facility for the unhoused, but she also has been covering the Fifeville neighborhood on Cherry Avenue and the development that's going on there. It's led by PHA. So Erin, I know we wanted some follow up from our city reps on how they think particularly that Fifeville development is impacting the city and what their hopes are for it. But I'm sure you all kind of get the gist of the conversation. But I know Razor wanted to add something as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just to jump ship till Erin comes back in and we talk politics. On a personal note, because the two of you have ascended to very high positions here in Charlottesville, and you are men of color, you are black men, do you feel a certain obligation to your black community? I know we generally, so we don't get in trouble, we want to call everything a minority and group everybody together. But just as black men, do you feel any type of responsibility to develop things for black men in your tenure while y'all are working?
You have a big brother complex.
Well, I've been a big advocate of mentoring for, since my time at Norfolk State University, and I've carried it out over here. And I still, even though this commitment of city council for me is a good 25 hours a week, I still think it's important that I mentor, some of the young men that I had had started to. I think that is the biggest impact that we have. And the question is, I do see an obligation there. We have many requests to give graduation speeches already in this capacity. I've already been to Beaufort to speak to students. I plan to go to Keys Academy in the next few weeks, and so I do see an obligation. I think that I want to be in the space of being a Black leader. The importance of that. I know when I was growing up in Richmond public schools, for someone to come and speak to me in different schools and things, that what it meant. And so I have that ability now, and every opportunity that I can, if I can fit it in my schedule, I will do it.
Thank you for that.
And what I'll add to that is I'm Black. I'll never forget. As long as the mirror exists, I'll always see it. But I know who I am, and I know what I've been doing, and I know what I will continue to do. Mm-hmm. For me, the answer is absolutely. It's a part of what I have to think about because I can't not see the impacts of those of us who have not been able to make things work for us and or receive a fair shake and a fair opportunity to do the things that some of us have been able to do. So for that reason, when I'm doing my work, I'm always looking for that angle. What is an additional approach to reaching down and reaching out and reaching to, building that bridge? So a lot of the work, especially the initial work, because I've only been city manager for 6 months. People forget that. I've been around for 2 years beyond that, but I've only been city manager for 6 months. Most of the times that I am looking at what it is that we're doing, I'm looking with that lens in mind as well. So we've been talking a lot about hiring and not being able to fill our positions. One of the things that I've been talking with our HR director about is how do we look at the minimum qualifications for positions? Are we actually setting up barriers, unnecessary barriers to people being able to get a job with the city, and how that causes us to not even be able to do a good job, but yet we have individuals capable of doing the job. They may just have an issue here or there. So we're looking at that. We've created some trainee program positions already, and I plan to do more of that. In economic development, I'm asking questions about how are we reaching the various individuals that are not the average person in economic development, the Black individuals, Black-owned businesses, some of the women-owned businesses, minority-led businesses as well. When I walk the mall, I recognize that there are not many Black faces on that mall. I have a concern about that. I've been talking about that. And in the downtown mall committee conversation we've been doing for the past year, I keep bringing it up. So for me, that's how it displays in the work that I'm doing, is that I never lose sight of it because I'm always asking that specific question when we're doing the work.
That is definitely important here, because I was going to ask that precise thing. When you talk about, faced with that sort of contrast, right, of like the Black community and it having a history here, and them trying to hold on to that history, that community, that sense of, right. But then you have developers. Let's be totally honest. You have some developers that come in that want to repaint Charlottesville,
and that's everywhere. It's everywhere. But yes, absolutely. Yeah. And part of what my point to them has been, because I've talked to some of them and they don't necessarily like me either. You need to think about what you're doing, and you need to come with a better proposal. And your proposal needs to include the things that you're hearing these folks talk about, because they're not going anywhere. You might not be able to get done what you want to do, but they're not going anywhere. And I think it's important for people to appreciate that and not try to bulldoze through some of these things. Yeah,
I got to ask, because you brought it to mind. Have you all found examples, like successful examples of how you could have a very historic city and community, but they work with, let's say, culturally sensitive developers? And like for cohabitation of development alongside.
Well, I mean, it's hard. I'm not going to try to paint a picture that is very easy and that it's very commonplace, because it's not. But all around the country, there are developers that are doing better versions of their developments, where they're signing community benefits agreements with the residents that they're doing their work in, to make sure that those folks are on the same page with them. They talk to them. They are consulting them before they even put a plan together, so they don't insult them. They consult them. So I think that's what we're trying to impress upon some of the developers who are here locally, is that That's what it appears that the public is asking for. And I know 5 people who keep saying that is what we're asking for. Mm-hmm. So as I've talked to some of the developers, I remind them, don't lose sight of that because your project might not make it.
Mm-hmm. When I was in grad school from 88 to 90, I actually lived in that quarter. I actually lived in the house that's right behind the corner restaurant. So I shopped at that grocery store that was there. I was really excited when this proposal came through where you would have housing, community space, a grocery store, a place for nonprofits. And the most important part of that is the way that the developer and the community work together. And it took them, I understand, 1 or 2 years to do that. So they put in the work, and it's ironic because when the night or the week that we heard that, mm-hmm. we heard from another controversial development where the developer did not get that robust community input. And mm-hmm. we had many people come and speak in opposition to it from the community.
Right.
And then I can't remember if it was the same meeting or the next night, but it was definitely the same week. We had this project where we had pretty much 90% of the community come out to speak in support of it because the developer and the community and PHA had done the work to get community buy-in. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference in how to me it's the blueprint of how to get things done. It's still a lot of work to do with this project, but they're way ahead because I feel a high degree of confidence that what's the people want. When Ms. Wood came and spoke for it, I was like, okay, that's going a long way, and that I think the community support it. And so I think that a proposal like that, where we're going to kind of tie that in with the Cherry Avenue corridor and other concerns that we have in our community, that's going to be a really desirable community. But also, we know things that's on the radar that I mentioned earlier, that the call that I got yesterday from a resident who's concerned about their neighborhood turning into an Airbnb right. It's in our neighborhood too. So when you make things really attractive, because when I was in grad school, and I didn't go to grad school with Thomas Jefferson, it was in the late 80s. I was told, coming that this was a really tough neighborhood, but I came from Richmond. I didn't think it was any tough neighborhoods in Charlottesville, and now, the Fifield and 10th and Page, we know that those are more the highly desirable neighborhoods to live in. So it's really changing. So we need to make sure that, and it's going to be part of the things that's on Sam's work list, is that when we study these neighborhoods, what can we do to preserve it, to do what we do to make it, diverse and special, it all has to tie in together. So I'm looking forward to getting more information about this, the Cherry Avenue proposal. I'm excited about the affordable housing aspect of it, the grocery store aspect of it, in conjunction with Tonsler Park, which we're doing a Parks and Rec study now that I know there'll probably be some changes there. So it's exciting what's happening in that corridor.
Gotcha. Thank you. And are you all cool sticking with us through the breaks? We're up against the hour.
Sure.
Yeah, and then we'll wrap up.
And Charles, if you want to tell Erin, if she emailed the questions, I have my she knows how to get me, so she can send those emails to me right now. I'll happily read them and answer.
We'll do. And family, likewise for y'all. Go ahead and comment with any questions or additions to the discussion that you have for the city manager and city mayor. But stay tuned and tell a friend. We'll be right back. IMHO Talk Show, Sir Charles Razor. In the booth in the building with your city manager, Sam Sanders, and your city mayor, Juan Diego Wade. So when we left off, y'all, we were in the throes of the housing conversation. So, Sam, I had already heard you mention, a talk about Erin was covering the potential property the could purchase for about $4 million. Is that right?
Right.
And then, she's also a part of the Fifield development. So it's a couple of things that Erin had mentioned. And Erin, I see you reconnected again. I don't know if that's any better.
I'm trying on my phone. Is this better?
We got you, Erin.
Okay. Yay. Hello at last. Clear. Well, now I can't even see the questions I put in the chat.
I'm sure you got to memorize.
I know. I have them written down in like 5 places. But yeah, this is pretty much how my whole week has gone. But thank you for having me on, and thank you for your patience.
Oh, yes, indeed.
So I remember back in, what was it, November already? CIM hosted the Can I Talk to You, Seville conversation about housing.
Mm-hmm.
And which is online and available for folks to watch. And if you're interested in housing in Charlottesville, I highly recommend that you watch it.
Yes, indeed.
And Sam was part of that panel. And during that conversation, Sam, you brought up the community benefits agreement between the Fifeville Neighborhood Association, Piedmont Housing Alliance, and Woodard Properties, which is a private developer, as an example for how future developments could happen in the city. And I'm just wondering, the city now has this inclusionary zoning ordinance where developers have to include a certain amount of affordable housing. There are incentives to build more of it in a development of certain sizes, etc. But I feel like that there's so much more that has to happen before like a community benefits agreement can even, happen. And it's really like, for a private developer, you can't just tell them they have to do that, right?
Sure.
So like what are the things that the city can do to encourage these types of agreements and conversations to make sure that the neighborhood is heard and is involved in these kinds of developments, period, I guess?
Sure. So what I'll say is, thank you for the question. I think it's good to be able to further explain that, just so that people understand how they work. A community benefits agreement is really more of a natural type of arrangement and a negotiation, agreement, discussion. It captures the discussion that occurs with the developer and members of the community that are interested and sometimes concerned. They can be interested and be positive, but interested and sometimes concerned about how different the neighborhood might be from that development. But the best way for them to be used is that they're mutually agreed to. They're signed by both sides. So that basically says what you're going to do, and then we're going to be able to see that you do exactly what you said you were going to do. There's no teeth in them except that the government can ask, is there one? And review that and consider that existence as a demonstration that there was engagement of the community. We do have in our development process that there is engagement of the community required. It doesn't necessarily require an agreement to result. The agreement is more of a best practices tool. It's what affordable housing nonprofits across the country, I used to run one, have all tried to push for, to try to encourage developers to do it in the right way. Don't come and bring your development to a neighborhood. Let the neighborhood also be a part of what you bring to them, so that they too can see it, appreciate it, feel it, touch it, and even experience it. The thing about the agreements, the agreement that I saw, the agreement process even was Fifeville, was that all the parties that needed to be at the table they stayed there, they went through a lot, they talked about a lot. And we did have the mirror conversation going where that was not the case. And it turned into a very interesting public meeting that I was able to see and react to and was bothered by, because it felt as though, how can we do this in a place where we know people are going to be vocal about whatever it is that they may not like? I think the community benefits process is probably the better. It is a model example of how to do it, because it ensures that you get that feedback from the neighborhood.
And one of the things, thank you for that. One of the things that was brought up is whether people saying that they want more affordable housing, and not necessarily just
Any
like,
house,
like a skyscraper apartment. So how does that go into the plans? Because of course, properties for houses means more money, blah blah blah, more acreage. Like when you hear that comment though, like where does your mind go when it comes to development, affordable housing versus apartment?
And that is that's the quality of the conversation. It's to go in all those different places. When you talk about, do you want it to be so tall and it just peers over the neighborhood? Part of the conversation is, so what can you do to soften that? What can you do to make that a little bit different? Architects are very creative individuals. That's why they have degrees. That's why they do what they do. If you give them a task, they'll figure it out. So that is a moment of clarity from the community to the developer. Take it back to your architect and tell them to come up with something creative. tell them to make sure that this wall is not the wall that I see out my front door. It's 5 stories tall when I walk outside all of a sudden. I can live with 2 or 3 if you do some things to it. And an architect is responsible for turning that into something that works.
And do you all feel like that you have the leverage to say no? Like, I'm curious about that. Those conversations, like, do you feel that you have the strength to be like, hey, well, like, this is what our city needs, and we'll find another developer if need be, or let's be honest, like in this game, not just for Charlottesville, you see it in different cities. Like, do the developers kind of have an upper hand in some way?
Well, at least for us, we know that what we can approve, some things are by right, and they can do A, B, and C because we've passed a zoning ordinance, whatever. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times they want to do a little bit extra, do something different, and when they do that, we have the ability to say, well, if you want to do that, if you come into us, then we can say that maybe there's some things that we would like to see if you want those extra floors or extra units. Mm-hmm. And part of the previous discussion that you all had, mm-hmm. You and Sam just in, is that what I'm finding out is that what is defining affordable housing, there's so many different, levels of that. We mentioned the 0 to, AMI, which those are unhoused in our community. Right. And it can go all the way up to 80%, mm-hmm. which, almost at market value, or a little bit cheaper. So it's really how you define it. And that has a big play in how you, how their finance it is when they are working with their financial institution. So I'm learning a lot more detail on this as each project that I work on.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you mentioning. Yeah, because the income ratio and that disparity it's almost unfair to just look at it from an AMI perspective. Yeah,
Hey, Joe.
Yes, sir.
Hey, we're talking. Let's talk in-house for a second. Where are we at with the collective bargaining agreement that we had with the school bus drivers and the K-Tech property? Like, we're talking a lot about housing from people coming into our community, building things. But where are we at with the things that we need to deal with in-house?
So we separate collective bargaining and K-Tech. So let me take K-Tech because it's quicker and easier. So K-Tech was funded as an acquisition. City paid for the acquisition of the building, thereby buying out Albemarle County. So now K-Tech is 100% owned by Charlottesville City Schools. They're still working with Albemarle for the spaces that they occupy and coming up with a long-term vision for what it now means for it to be a CCS property and project to manage from that point on. So that's separate. As it relates to collective bargaining, the city has permitted 3 bargaining units: police, fire, and transit. Transit includes school bus drivers. All 3 of them have been at the negotiating table with the city negotiating team. So that's our staff and legal representatives working to the development of a contract. So it'll be 3 separate contracts. The goal is to get those done as soon as possible. They each come with their own price tag. And the goal is to be able to work those into the FY25 budget. So council will approve and then I will sign. And then they go effective July 1 of this year.
Gotcha.
And to piggyback on Razor's question, what about anti-displacement measures for folks who already live here but can see maybe being squeezed out as so many folks already have? I feel like maybe collective bargaining kind of plays into that as well. But I've heard some rumblings about an anti-displacement working group for the city. Can you give us folks an update on kind of where the city is thinking on anti-displacement measures right now?
Yeah, I can chime in a little bit with that. That was a big discussion when we were working on the zoning ordinance. What would that look like? And it was, with some proposals there that maybe, if you live in these certain neighborhoods, you couldn't sell your house for a certain time. But we didn't want to go down that route because if you're a person of color, you've been living in there 40 or 50 years and someone came to you and offered you $1 million or whatever for your house, we don't want to say you can't take advantage of the generational wealth or whatever that others are. And so we didn't want to put that in. We'd say, we just need to take some time to study how we're going to implement this. And that's some of the things we're going to be doing this year or in the future. It's a really difficult thing to legislate or to put policy or to regulate something like that, because no matter what you do, you're going to be impacting someone's um, um, the way they can, use their property. So it's really difficult, and it can have both negative and positive impact. So it's real difficult, and so we want to be really uh, judicious as how we impact that. I don't know, Sam, if you want to chime in more with that.
Yeah, what I'll add to it is anti-displacement. There is no one magic bullet. That's the unfortunate thing. If there was just one or two things that council could dial up, put them into play, and that in itself ends it, then it would be great. That doesn't exist. And really what it is a series of things. And I think that's the test for the city government, is to figure out how many different things can we deploy that are all intended to leave room for those with less resources. That's really the test. That's the goal. That's the mission. So we have what we're referring to as an affordable housing toolkit. It is meant to be a series of housing related things that the government can consider doing. Actually, on the 5th of February, during the work session for council's meeting at that time, we will be presenting that affordable housing toolkit in the concept of what are all the different things. If I remember correctly, there might be like 23 different things that we could potentially do, all in the vein of trying to make sure that affordable housing remains a priority. We're doing what we can to preserve and protect units, and that we're also producing as many more units as we possibly can. And it just demonstrates that it's ongoing work. A land bank is an example of that. That's a topic that people have been bringing up more and more lately. A land bank is a resource. It doesn't just kill all the issues. And this is a small community. We have a small footprint. A land bank can only do so much. But there are a number of things. We have a rental assistance program that the city is doing that it runs alongside CRHA's voucher program. There are many communities that would never touch something like that. I think it's amazing that we do that, and to the tune of the money that we spend doing it. So it's really, it's global. It's doing a number of things all at the same time, and all of them have an impact. So then you have a more collective impact.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Dan, how do you do affordable housing without turning it into a project?
Say that again.
Good question.
How do you do affordable housing without turning it into a project? Because the last few things that you said sounded much like the things I heard in the major cities in like the 80s, in the 90s.
Sure.
And they ended up ultimately turning into projects.
Well, what we also are talking about is mixed income opportunities. So if you don't congregate the same income population, then you won't turn it into a project. But the key to any development is property management. I will always say that, and I've been saying that more and more because I know that to be the truth. If you manage the properties well, that means you'll keep the standard that you set upon construction. And that's what you can protect and preserve the opportunity for those who live there.
Now, what does the data say in regards to the homelessness and the unhoused, whether they may be folks that get displaced and whatnot? Like when it comes to how you would like to budget for it, because like the $4 million as for shelters is one thing, but I imagine that had to be linked to conversations about, hey, like we need to think ahead of the game on like how, whether it's the development or whatnot, may be impacting, again, whether it's the displacement or the unhoused. I'm just curious, like, the data you may be looking at, and like, when it comes to the city setting aside money, because the $4 million is just one building.
That's right. And one opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually even not a building.
That's right. It's not even that. It's a concept right now.
The site.
Yeah, and I would say for something like that is that we've expressed to the city manager, we as city council, and he has expressed it as one of his priorities as well, is that we want to do what we can for those that are unhoused in our community. We see them on the downtown mall. We see them need during Parcham this time of year, and when for a city that's 10 square miles, when an opportunity like this comes up, you have to try to take advantage of it, just like it did with K-Tech. You just don't get those opportunities. And so now if we do decide to proceed with the purchase of it, it's not like we're going to start building next year. We need to have a public input process, because we have already heard from the neighbors that, not that they're against it or for it, but they just want to make sure that there's a public input process so they can know what's going to be there. And we're committed to hearing what the public wants to be there, but we have to get the the property first, and then we could decide to do something else with it. But it's this in this community, we have to have public input process, whether it's required or not. They demand it, and I'm glad that they do.
Yeah, thank you. Now we are up against time, but I want to make sure that you all chime in on a couple of other questions and comments that we had from some listeners, in particular, like your takes on public safety and like what's needed in regards to I know Razor kind of mentioned shortages when it comes to transportation and stuff. But that leads into the question about the schools. Like when you just think about the resources that the city maybe can provide to the schools to solve some of the issues that we saw that we've seen popping up, particularly within the last school year at the high school, for instance, whether that be teacher shortage or whatnot. And then the public safety kind of feeds into that, because a lot of folks, kind of said there were community issues being brought into the schools. So like, we'd love your take on that sort of dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, you can't have things happening in the neighborhood and they don't find their way in the schools. That's always a concern, and vice versa. It could pop off at school and then go into the community as well. The key is to really try to have a pulse on what's happening, have connections. I believe our chief has demonstrated that he is not afraid of any neighborhood, any person. He goes into the neighborhood, he's hanging out, talking, getting to know. He's bringing officers along, trying to help them do the same. I think that's the message that we want to instill in this police force, that they need to be engaged with the public and be willing to receive and hear everything that they may have to say, and then use that as motivation for better relationships. The other part of it, I think, is just to be sure that when we hear from schools administration and they communicate to us what it is that they need, that we do our best to be responsive to that. Make sure that there's a relationship between the superintendent and the police chief and Commonwealth attorney, for that matter, because all these different things come together. But to ensure that we're actively working to not have the problem. I mean, we want to respond to the problem, of course, but we also want to do what we can to ensure that those things don't happen in the first place. And we've got to work on programming for our youth. We keep hearing that as a part of the various issues, as it was tied to our rash of gun violence issues that we kept having at one point. And these are young people in the schools. So we've been looking at, what are we doing? Are there more things that we could do within our human services and social services departments? Those are questions that I posed to my team. And then in talking with the superintendent, I went to the high school, toured the high school with him, let him tell me what it was that he felt priorities were. And those have now been integrated into the ask that they are proposing for their budget. So then it becomes an issue for council to reconcile with me on how do we budget all the different things that are going on.
Got you. And that makes me think of the county too.
Yeah.
It's like, because city is landlocked. It's landlocked.
Yeah.
So we got to have a relationship too. And that is a high priority for me, is to keep the conversation, keep the doors open, keep the lines of communication open, because how Charlottesville goes, so goes the county.
Yeah. Juan?
Yes, I just wanted to chime in with that. Of course, I'm a 33-year employee of Albemarle County. So, and Lloyd and I, and now Brian and I, are meeting on a regular basis with the chair and the vice chair of the board of supervisors, and many of them I had longstanding relationships with before I got on council. So those type of communication lines are very open now, and we use them all the time for different projects and things that come up. And I think that's very important as a community like this, where everything is really connected, but legally we're separated.
And talking about the same things, homelessness, housing, those are all issues that overlap very easily.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Hey, fellas, y'all might can't answer this. And Charles, I know we're right up against Al, but
yeah, I was going to ask you what your last question was.
All right.
Yeah, I'm coming now. In my humble opinion, Albemarle is not doing their part. They are allowing Charlottesville to take all the blunt of it, and they skirt out there and they get the spoils. I don't know if Charlottesville can make Albemarle more inclusive. So that goes all the way to the mountains. So we're talking about Western Albemarle too. We're talking about Monticello. But it seems that any problem that goes noticed, it's put on Charlottesville, and they don't have any skin in the game. That's my own, and that's not talking about the people. That's talking about the system itself, the way they operate.
Yeah, and that's representation too. We have Aaron on here. It's like when the city school has a problem, it's like national news. But then it's like, because it's the city of Charlottesville, it gets different attention. And
well,
you're right.
And I would add UVA too, right? Like they're part of our community as well, and they're also
Only when they
part
want
of
to be.
this. Well, right, which is the
Oh, you definitely got to add
question,
UVA.
right?
Yeah.
Like we have a 3-pronged kind of culture in a way here. Like they're not culture, that's not the right word, but like it's Charlottesville, UVA, Albemarle County. You know, what are the responsibilities that they all have to one another? And because you can't extract one from the other in the way that we live, right? Like they're all kind of tangled in. I'm thinking of like a rubber band ball where everything's overlapping and stuff. So that's another question,
and I think
right?
that's a perfect note to. I think it's a perfect note to end on. If you all wanted to kind of give your sort of, I guess, last words to to the community when it comes to that vision of us all working together to move Charlottesville forward. And we got to get Mike in here too, Mike, because I know Mike wants to tax UVA, and I'm with it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I just I agree, and I think that and I forgot who said it just a few minutes ago, just that it's not the people, but actually it is the residents of Albemarle can demand or request that their leaders, help address the unhoused problem, the climate problems, and things like that. They, and I know them, that they listen to their constituents and to, to work with the city or in the university together. So they do have a say into it.
And Razor's always trying to get me to be a politician, so I have to resist that, not get myself in trouble. But I get what you're saying. Everybody has a role to play in it. We are one community in that sense that no one distinguishes, except people around here, distinguishes Albemarle County from Charlottesville. They just say Charlottesville, period. So we should care about that. We should recognize that as parents are looking to send their kids to UVA, they're evaluating Charlottesville just the same. They all go hand in hand. Working together is how we fix some of the longstanding issues that have persisted in our community. And I think we all are dealing with some of the same stuff. We may not always in the past have talked about it as much as openly as we needed to. And of course, there are triggers and levers that are being pulled with who has the power and all that type of stuff. But I think it's important that if you have the right people in the room and those individuals who aren't afraid to say what needs to be said, like myself, then you tend to get somewhere different than you have in the past.
That is awesome. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Thank you for your time. And I'm sure folks can go to the city website to see how to reach you if they have more follow up.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for for being open doors and always willing to engage in the community. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you all.
IMHO Talk Show.